Welcome to LabMinutes.com in our lab video series on Cisco ASA CX. You can find a complete list of ASA CX video on our website by clicking on the link above and sign up for our newsletters to receive the latest video updates. So in this video, we're going to put our freshly installed ASA CX into what's called a monitor mode to gather traffic information. So the monitor mode is a non-intrusive way to add CX to your network, usually for a validation purpose, to give you visibility to your network traffic without passing the extra traffic through the CX and have the CX in the path of the traffic. We're probably not going to spend a whole lot of time on the monitor mode, so we're just going to go ahead and get the CX up and running in the monitor mode so we can see some traffic going through it and do a quick passive authentication with the CDA so we can get the user information as well. But that's pretty much it. Since I would say 99% of the time you wouldn't have your CX running in the monitor mode for your production. Now for our lab setup, we have our ASA firewall 1 with the CX software service enabled, and this is what we're going to be configured or enabled the monitor mode on. On the outside of the firewall is VLAN 11, that's basically provide internet access to through the internet router. On the inside is VLAN 10 that connects to the core switch. Now on the server side on VLAN 32 with the subnet 172.16.32.0/24, we have Windows 2008 domain controller and DNS server, the IP of .40. And on the same subnet, we also have a CDA server, or context directory agent server, the IP of .107, which is pre-configured, pre-installed, and it's also already been integrated with the Active Directory to provide us with the service for passive authentication we'll use later on in this lab to obtain the user identity. If you guys are not sure how to work with the CDA server, don't worry about that right now, since we're going to have a separate video that will walk you through the installation and configuration of the CDA server more extensively. Now for a test device, we have our Windows domain computer, LM-Win7 Test 1 on VLAN 64 that we'll be using to generate some user traffic that we can later on look at on the CX. So before we get started with the configuration, there's something that you need to know about the monitor mode on the CX. First of all, the minimum ASA software version that supports that is 9.1.2, so make sure that your software is up to date with that. So the way that the monitor mode works is the traffic gets copied and sent to the CX by the ASA. So this is very similar to having an IPS module set up in a promiscuous mode. So it's not the actual traffic that gets passed through the CX, it's the copy of that. And as a result, most of the policies that is available on the CX will have pretty much no meaning, and this is including where there's deny action or the decryption capability, since we're only dealing with the copy of the traffic. And to get the user identity, we can only use the passive authentication and not the active authentication. And we'll, in a separate video, again talk about the differences between the passive and the active authentication, but for now, just keep in mind that it only works with the passive authentication, which requires the CDA. And once you put the CX in the monitor mode, it can only operate under the single device mode only. It cannot be added later on onto the Prism server or the Prime Security Manager server. And lastly, both ASA and CX must be configured to support the monitor mode. Otherwise, the whole thing would not work if you have one configured but not the other. All right, now let me jump onto our RDP session on the domain controller. So here we have the web interface or login page for the CX module. So we're going to go ahead and log into that. And this is directly to the CX module itself. Now, since it's the first time we actually log into this device, we're being asked whether or not to participate with Cisco Network participation. So for now, since this is our lab, we're going to select no to that and then click Save. Now to enable the monitor mode, we can go under the configuration you see right here as the last option. On the top, there's a option for monitor mode only, and this is only available if you were in a single device mode. That means you're logged in directly and manage the CX without going through the Prism server. And to enable that, you just basically switch that from off to on and then click Save. Okay, so now the update came back successful. So that's pretty much what it takes to turn on the monitor mode on the CX. Now on the ASA side of things, we need to send the copy of the traffic from the ASA to the CX, and this is done through a class map, policy map, again very similar to if you were dealing with IPS service. So now let me bring up the console or SSH session to the firewall. So we do show run policy map. So this is the default global policy. So what we're going to do is to come up with a very simple class map. So we're going to, let's say, send everything that's going through the ASA as a copy to CX. We're going to use the command match any. Okay, and then we're going to go back under the global policy map using the class we just created, which is class CX. And here there's an option for the CX SC. Okay, and then you have an option whether to do fail closed or fail open. Let's go ahead and do fail open since we're just going to be dealing with a copy of the traffic. And then at the end, you need to specify that we're only going to send the copy of the traffic with the monitor mode only option. And then it came up with a little warning that said monitor mode should only be used for demonstrations and evaluations. Since this particular mode prevents the CX from denying that or alerting the traffic, and that makes sense because we're not dealing with the real traffic here. So now last thing we need to do is to go back to the CX and create a matching policies. And we're just going to create a very simple policy here. Click the little drop down, go to access policy. And don't worry too much about what we're doing here. We're going to go through all these different configurable options more extensively in the separate videos. So for now, we're just going to create a basic match all or match any. So under the access policy set, let's go ahead and create a policy or add a policy and give it a name. Let's call it allow all. Although the allow or deny, it doesn't have too much meaning here. And then we're going to keep source destination to any. And then just click save. Okay, so now that we have our policy created under the default access policy set, make sure we commit the change we just made. So right here, click commit, and we pretty much should be ready to go. Okay, so before we start generating some network traffic, I'm going to go under the events tab so we can watch the real-time log for this. So select real-time eventing. Make sure it has the little play button there pressed. Then what we're going to do now is to jump over to our test1 test machine right here and generate some web traffic. Okay, so let's keep that in the background. And then let's go over to that. Let me log in as our user employee 1 here. Although the user doesn't really have much meaning at this point since we're dealing with only IPs. So I'm going to open web browser and let's say go to google.com. As you can see, you can get to Google. We go to cisco.com. That works too. Maybe go to pstn.com. Takes a couple seconds to load. Let me open a new tab while that's loading. Go to YouTube. You can see that you can hit all those websites just fine. And now if we go back to real-time monitoring, you can see there's a whole lot of traffic that was being seen or coming through this page right here. Let me see if I can try to pause that so it stops scrolling here. And we can just pay our attention under the destination column. So we first went to google.com. So right here we saw destination is Google, and then we went to cisco.com. And this is the cisco.com as a destination. Let's keep going up, and then we went to ESPN. So ESPNs are out here as well. You can see the destination port. So these are some of the information that you can kind of gather just based on having the CX looking at the copy of the traffic, the application type. So you can see this is ESPN web browsing. You can see that right now we are currently under all events. You can actually switch over to context-aware security. Although real-time wouldn't make much sense anymore since we have no longer generating any traffic. So we can go back to the view historic event for the last 30 minutes. Give it a couple seconds for that to pull. I think we were left up around ESPN. So you can see that under this particular tab, you have a couple more columns you can look at. You got application, which we saw that under the all events tab. Then we also have here a web category, the actual URL that the user was going to. The policy name that got matched for us is allow all, so that's the only policy that we have. And just FYI, you can add pretty much as many columns as you like by clicking on this little icon on the right and then just drag it over from left to right here. So let's keep going up. We saw ESPN, so we should see some YouTube at some point. Looks like we generate quite a bit of traffic there. I can quite find the YouTube, so let me turn that back to real-time eventing one more time, and then here let me do a refresh on YouTube. There you go. So application YouTube, and the web category is streaming videos, and you see the actual URL as well, and we also have here a reputation score for these sites. Alright, so far we can only see the IP address for the source. It would be really helpful if we can actually see the username appear as the source, so you can easily identify who's going where, doing what kind of internet activity through your network. So what we're going to do next is to configure what's called a passive authentication, and what that means is the CX is going to be relying on the username to IP mapping that's being maintained by as a separate entity called a CDA, or a context directory agent. And based on those mapping information, the CX can correlate from the IP address to the username and then present it here as part of the whether it's event logging or the report. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do here is to join the CX to the Active Directory domain, so that way it has access to whether to do a query or lookup. So to do that, let me kind of leave this event page up and bring up a separate tab for our configuration. That will be done under the configuration. Actually, it will be component and directory realm. Okay, so click on that, and under the I12, if you click, you can add realms. So add that. The name of the realm, let's just call it LabMinutes. And for the directory type, we are dealing with Active Directory, so select that. The primary domain is labminutes.com. The user that we're going to use to join CX to the domain is just going to use our administrator account with the corresponding password. And we can click here, test domain join. Once the connection comes back succeeded, you can click save. Okay, so it said the realm has been created. Click OK. And next we're going to jump over to our CDA, which is our LMCDA2 right here, the IP of .107. That's been pre-configured. So I'm going to log in. Okay, so just to give you a quick overview, CDA is a pretty straightforward server. And all it does is it joins the Active Directory. Because as you can see right here, we have that pre-configured to join our dc.labminutes.com. And what it does is it monitors the Windows login and log off activity, so that way it will be able to tie the username and to the IPs and create the user to IP or IP to user mapping. Okay, so it maintains a database or a table of that, which you can see right here, mapping IP to identity. And then we need to add the what's called consumer device, which is the devices that contacts the CDA and query the IP to user mapping information. And so far we have the CX1, our CX device, added as a consumer device, the IP of 192.16.10.250, and that's pre-configured. You can click edit, and all it takes is just the name, IP address, and the secrets that's being shared between the CDA and the consumer device. Okay, now the syslog server section, that's something else which we would look into when we look at the CDA in the CDA videos, but let's not concern ourselves with that right now. Okay, now I'm going to show you the IP to identity mapping page. And so far we have a mapping for, I guess this is some SQL service account. We've got a mapping for employee 1, although the IP is not so accurate. We might need to log off and log back on our test 1 machine. And then we also have the username mapping, and this is probably the result of us trying to join the CX to the domain just now. And that's why the IP showed up as the CX IP 10.250. So to get the correct IP for employee one. Let me kind of delete that real quick and then maybe log off and then log back in. All right, looks like we get the right IP this time. It's just more like an FYI, we kind of have our domain controller dual home for us to be able to RDP in from the outside. That's why the IP kind of came up incorrectly earlier, but now it looks like the locking off and locking back on the test one machine kind of clears that up. So here, our test one machine has the IP of 172.16.64.144, and the username corresponds to that is employee one, which is the user that we are using to log into that machine. Okay, so now that we have an accurate IP to user mapping table, we're going to configure our CX to utilize that. And this is going back to the configurations on the CX. Drop down the menu, and here there's an option to add an AD agent. So click on that. The host name is 172.16.32.107. The password, which is the share secret, I believe we gave it Cisco when we pre-configure that. So let's test a connection. You can see it connects successfully. Go ahead and save, and then make sure to commit the change. Okay, commit. While that's running, we can come back onto the CDA, and under the registered devices, you can see that the CX1 showed up as a consumer on the consumer device list, and we know that we have a good connection between the CX and the CDA. Okay, so now that we have the CDA added to the CX, the last thing we need to do is to create an identity policies. So under the configuration policy settings, you can drop down, there is an option for identity policies. And it looks like there's a default policies created already. So let's take a quick look and see how it's configured right now. So here with the default policy, the realm is set to LabMinutes, which is the only realms that we have configured right now. So that's fine. That's actually what we want. And then for the action, it's been chosen to get identity using AD agent. And this corresponds to passive authentication. Okay, then we're just going to leave everything else at default. Save the change, although we didn't really quite make any changes. Just going to go ahead and commit anyway, just to make sure. And now we can go back and perform another test. So let's go back to the event, and let's go ahead and add another column for the username. So I'm going to put that right in front of the source column. Click OK. Not sure if I have a copy of a tab here. Maybe I misclick on it. Let me go ahead and delete that and add the user column one more time. So username rather. So username in front of the source, and then go back to our test machine. Then try google.com, and then cisco.com. It looks like when you add a column, it modifies it and then create a tab for you, since you, I guess, cannot modify any pre-configured tabs right here. Anyway, go back, cisco.com. Let's try YouTube. All right. So you can see now under the username column and even the source, it has been changed from the IP address to the actual username. So I can actually perform a filter based on the source. So you can see when you click on each of these attributes, I guess, it immediately creates a filter for you. So you can see here source equal employee one, and let me go back instead of doing it real time, do a historic event, and the filter has already been set. So we should only be seeing the traffic that have been generated by employee one. I guess I have to hit filter right there. So you can see all these traffics that's being sent from employee one. Okay, so YouTube right here, keep trying to go down, cisco.com from employee one, and I'm sure if I scroll down further enough, we should be seeing the Google being accessed as well right here, google.com. Alright, so now that we are aware of the actual user that sends us traffic, we can also go back to the dashboard and see what kind of information we are allowed to see. Just basically having the CX configured as in the monitor mode. Okay, so just do a quick flyby on our dashboard here under the network overview. You can see there's a statistic on the transaction, so number of transaction based on time. There's no malicious transactions so far, which is good. Health performance, CPU, memory utilization on the CX. There's no IPS threats detected. Top source, you can see that here we have our LabMinutes employee1 user. Okay, 32.40, that's our domain controller, which has, I guess, the top user right now. Policy hits, we only have one policies, and then here's destinations laid out, whether it's based on categories or you can see there's computer, internet, sports and recreation. I guess that's ESPN that we went. So right here, Cisco, ESPN, application type, and the application, YouTube, HTTP, so on and so forth. Same thing if you kind of select some other page that is available in the dashboard, like users, you should be able to see the user-specific information as well as far as the data usage, and this is for the last 30 minutes. And you can actually see that there's a traffic from the administrator as well, as in addition to our employee one. And one last thing I want to show you is on the firewall. So if you go back and do a show service policy, and you can see at the bottom right here under our class map CX that we have configured for our CX, there's only a packet output that's being sent from the ASA to the CX and nothing being returned from the CX, which is indicated by the packet input being 0. And that's also confirmed that only the copy of the traffic is being sent to the CX when you operate under the monitor only mode. Alright, so you can see it's pretty straightforward to get your CX device up and running in the monitor mode. But again, you are pretty much limited to just the data collection without being able to do much else. Alright, that wraps up our video on ASA CX monitor only mode. You can visit our website to view an extensive list of our lab videos and sign up to get access to additional lab contents. Thank you for watching LabMinutes.com, and I'll see you guys in the next videos.